which is also good because then I go to the Supreme Court. And I have to tell you something. When you form a political party anywhere in the world, you need millions and millions and millions of dollars for newspapers, radio, and TV, which, of course, I don't have. So if they say no, then Romans 8:28. You all know Romans 8:28? All things work for good for those who love the Lord and serve his purposes. Now, since I don't have millions of dollars, what can give me a lot of really good publicity in Israel? Supreme Court. Because then all the radio, TV, and newspapers are going to ask me, what happened? How can it be that the Ministry of Justice rejects a political party of Judeo-Christian Western democracy, Western culture and democracy? And why do the Christians not have even one representative in our Congress, in our Knesset? So I'm trying to fix something that needs to be fixed and will be fixed. By the way, with me or without me. Okay, so I'm enjoying myself here in the States. I'm already on the rebound heading back to the East Coast and then back to Israel. And I'm sure Pastor Gary will announce as soon as the party has been recognized. And if it's not recognized, Pastor Gary will announce that Avi has submitted the whole thing to the Supreme Court in Israel. One way or another, it's going to work out. It's going to be a win or win no matter what. Yes, sir. You want me to remove it?
No, just push it down.
Okay. I can hear it here in the... Okay. So that's just kind of a first announcement for tonight. And obviously what I'm going to do is give an overview on the Middle East and where I think we're going. And I always have a question. I know the answer. You know the answer. Who here does not believe in God? Raise your hand. If you don't believe in God, raise your hand. Okay, so you see I'm preaching to the choir. I can go home. You see, my hope always is that there's going to be some non-believer who comes in and we bring them to the Lord. Okay? Now, the reason I ask the question is because if you look at what has been happening in the Middle East for the last 100, 150 years, you can see God's hand. God's hand is over everything. Even here in America, Trump's victory, I hope I don't offend any Democrats here. God's hand is on the United States of America. And I love President Obama very much because thanks to Obama, we got Trump. He prepared the American people for President Trump. The gist of the new DVD on the table basically is that countries like the United States, United Kingdom, England, Israel, and even Russia have turned to God. Now, I know Putin is a murderer, but he's a devout Russian Orthodox Christian. Communism was atheism. There is no more communism, and there is no more atheism in Russia today. Now, they're not, Southern Baptists or Pentecostals. They are Russian Orthodox, which is not an easy church to deal with. But there's a great revival in Russia today. There's a return to Christ and a return to God. And Putin is a friend of Israel in his own way. Also, there are many reservations. He supports the Iranians. The Iranians want to destroy Israel. So what I wanted to say is the following. I moved to Israel 50 years ago. And at that time, Israel had just won a war called the Six-Day War. And the Six-Day War was a miraculous war. We defeated Russia, we defeated Syria, and we defeated Jordan. And there were even armies from Iraq and Sudan and Morocco. And we defeated all of them in 6 days. This was totally, totally miracles from God. And I moved in 68, a year later. And I was ready to, I left my mom and dad, who, as most of you know, were from Argentina, who had moved to the United States. And for them, how could I leave the United States to go to a war zone? Israel's a war zone. And my parents said, you can be a good Jew in America too. Why do you have to go to Israel? I said, no, I have to go because God is commanding me to go. Just like he commanded Abraham to get up and leave his father's house and move to Israel. And I didn't have to serve in Vietnam because my lottery number was 210. They were drafting up to 120, for those of you old enough to remember. And my father said to me, if you go to Israel, you'll be in the army. I said, yes, that's what I want. And I was in the Israeli army. And in 1973, I was transferred from a desk job to artillery because they needed artillery. And I was such a gung-ho fighter. I was almost like looking forward to being in some war. And actually, in the 1973 war, I was mobilized in the artillery enough time that I could wear the ribbon for the Yom Kippur War. I can wear the ribbon for the 1982 Lebanon War. I was in artillery. And in 1977, we had maneuvers, artillery maneuvers in the desert. And we were told by our commanders, war with Egypt is imminent. In other words, we had a war in 67, 68 to 70 was the artillery duels on the Suez Canal. 73 is the Yom Kippur. It's almost like never-ending war with Egypt. So 4 years later, 77, we're told there's going to be again another war with Egypt. Little did we know that our new prime minister, Menachem Begin, one of the first things he did was to initiate a peace with Anwar Sadat. And I was not happy about the withdrawal from Sinai. But we made peace with Egypt. And there were two great benefits from the peace with Egypt. Number one, Egypt was no longer a military threat to Israel. Egypt was taken out of the circle of confrontation states. And without Egypt, all the other Arab countries cannot attack Israel. They need Egypt. No Egypt, no war. And Israel lost a lot of good boys. We lost like 2,600 killed, and the same number gravely wounded who were handicapped for the rest of their lives. Families were destroyed by this war. And so we really have not had a major war in the Middle East since 1973, thanks to the peace with Egypt. We've had altercations with Lebanon and altercations with Gaza, but they were not full-fledged wars. The second thing, I moved to Israel when Israel's population was 3 million. Thanks to the peace with Egypt, the population doubled. Today, the Jews are 6 million. I don't know if you know this or not, but the Christians in Israel are 500,000. Christians are 8% of the population today. So, Egypt was not a friendly country, really, ever, even though we had peace with them. And as you all know, we have this story about ISIS. And we have this story about the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which nearly destroyed Egypt. And today the Egyptian military and the Egyptian government needs Israel more than ever before because of the intelligence and other assistances that Israeli army gives the Egyptians. So our relations with Egypt are tighter now than ever. They hate us because Islam teaches them to hate the Jews. But they need us. They have to have peace with us at this time. So you see, if there was anyone here who didn't believe in God, you can very clearly see God's hand forcing the Egyptians to make peace with Israel. Then there's another country, Jordan. Jordan was an enemy. And I remember 50 years ago when I moved to Israel, I would read in the newspapers that the Jordanians had water in their kitchen taps 2 days out of the week. 5 days a week, Jordanians had no water. And as part of the peace agreement in 1994, Israel committed to providing the Jordanian people with all the water they needed, 24/7. And the Jordanians have water in their taps 24/7. And, I feel God is saying, I will bless those who bless Israel, and I will curse those who curse Israel. So Jordan made peace. They're blessing Israel. They're blessed. They get water. Israel put up so many desalination stations that today 70% of our water that we drink is desalinated water. Very tasty, very good water. We provide Jordan with all its needs. You heard about the civil war in Syria. Jordan has 1.6 million refugees from Syria. Israel provides all the water for the 1.6 million refugees. They invest their money in rockets and bombs and poison gas. They kill each other, and we invest our money in desalination. And we turn the desert green. And we know we cannot rely on the rain because the rain is very, very tricky in Israel, very fickle. So Israel has developed tremendous resources with desalination. And we have peace with Jordan. You know, Jordanians, they want to go to war with us. We turn off the tap. They don't got no water. We have them over a barrel. And the Egyptians, they don't want to have peace with us. ISIS is going to kill all of them. So you see, God's hand is very clear in the peace with Jordan and the peace with Egypt. Then you look at Syria. Olive Garden makes me so thirsty. Syria doesn't want to have peace with Israel. Syria wants war with Israel. So you tell me, where's Syria today? Doesn't exist. Syria has been broken up by God into cantons. You have the Kurds in the northeast, you have the Druze in the south, you have the Shiites in the northwest, the Christians in the center of the country. And the Sunnis want to kill everybody. And this will sound strange, but actually, contrary to what Senator John McCain says, the Russians are the good guys. Because the Russians helped to save the lives of the Christians in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. But Syria, for all intents and purposes, really does not exist anymore. Where's Iraq? Iraq is still at war with Israel. And God has dismembered sovereignly. He has dismembered Iraq. So you have a Sunni area, a Shiite area, and a Kurdish, like a new state forming of Kurds in the north. And they deserve to have a state because they're 40, 50, 60 million people. And they're in Turkey, and they're in Iran, and they're in Syria, and they're in Iraq. I'm going to talk a little more about the Kurds. So you look at the Middle East today, and you see that those nations which bless Israel, they get blessed. And relatively speaking, Jordan and Egypt today are stable. Syria and Iraq are not. So I want to share something. I know I've shared parts of this in my past visits here. How many people remember when I did a teaching about Saudi Arabia and Jethro? And Jethro, who was the father-in-law of Moses and also a cousin, was the high priest of Midian, and Midian was one of the sons of Abraham. So the Arabs are descended from Ishmael, the Druze are descended from Midian. All through Abraham, the children of Abraham. And because of a number of things that happened in Arabia between the Israelites and the Midianites, Jethro has to flee with his family. And Moses gives him an allotment of land in the Galilee. You all know where Jethro is buried? He's buried in Israel. He's buried in Tiberias. What's he doing in Tiberias? He and his family entered the land of Israel and received an allotment. Who says this also? Josephus. Now the Druze are scattered in 4 countries. They're in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. And the rule of the Druze is that wherever they live, they serve faithfully in the army of the country in which they live. So the Druze in Israel, 100,000, serve in the Israeli army. And you know what? They're the best soldiers we have. Druze are great soldiers. There are Druze in Lebanon, and they're all in the Shuf Mountains, and they have their own army. The Druze are Lebanese, and they're Druze. They have their own army. And the Druze in Jordan serve in the Jordanian army. And the Druze in Syria really are part of of Bashar al-Assad's army. So there's an area in the south of Syria called Mountain of the Druze. Did I talk about this here last time? I think I did. If I didn't, it's important you understand it now because this is where it's all going now. Mountain of the Druze in South Syria is about 30 miles from the Israeli Golan Heights. Israel has 100,000 Druze. The Golan Heights has 35,000 Syrian Druze. And the Syrian Druze on Mountain of the Druze are 700,000. And they're totally surrounded by ISIS and other fanatic Sunni groups who want to kill all of them. Genocide. Because that's what the Sunnis understand, genocide. So the Druze come to Netanyahu, the Druze of Israel, and say either Israel conquers the mountain and provides its umbrella over the Druze, protection, or let us Israeli Druze go as volunteers to fight alongside our brethren in South Syria. And then the Russians came in. So the Russians basically helped us to avoid getting entangled in the south of Syria. Because the Russians helped to defeat the Sunnis, ISIS. Lebanon is really an extension of Syria. And my wife, Rachel, you all know about my wife because I always talk about her. She retired 2 years ago from the radio. But at home, we have satellite dish, and we have like 1,300 Arabic stations. And my wife is constantly surfing the Arabic stations. It's like it's in her blood. She keeps doing it all the time, even though she's home. And there's a story, I might have mentioned it here last time. There is this Jordanian stand-up comedy guy, and he gets a death sentence from the fanatic Muslims. Why? Because he pretends to be an ISIS checkpoint guard, and a car drives up with Lebanese plates. Now, you see Lebanese plates, you know there's going to be a problem. You'll understand the problem in just a second. So there are 4 guys in the car. One's a Christian, one's a Druze, one's a Shiite, and one's a Sunni. And so the ISIS guard, who's being played by this comedian, says, "Oh, you guys are from Lebanon. Who are you?" "I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ." The other one says, "Who are you?" I'm a Druze. I believe in Jethro." That's why you have to know the Bible. You have to know who Jethro was. The Shiite says, "I'm a Shiite," and the Sunni, see, ISIS is Sunni, but the Sunni is a collaborator with these 3 other groups who are all considered heathens. And so the ISIS guard takes his machine gun and he kills all 4 of them. See, ISIS and the Sunnis have to kill everyone in Lebanon. Everyone has to die. The Druze, because they believe in Jethro, the Christians, because they believe in Jesus Christ, the Shiites are infidels, and the Sunnis are collaborators with all these infidels. So ISIS and the fanatic Sunnis have to kill everyone. Are you with me? Nobody is safe in Lebanon. So today, because the Russians and the Iranians are backing Bashar al-Assad, there is temporarily some kind of quiet in Lebanon. And Hezbollah, as much as it's an enemy of Israel, Hezbollah basically represents a coalition that is defending the Christians and the Druze. So Syria and Lebanon have both the same problem. They have an ongoing war between the Sunnis on the one side and everyone else on the other side. Now, I'm going to change for a moment into another direction. And this is maybe completely crazy. I know that there's some people who back Trump, and I agree with them on this, but we may be wrong. Listen, I've been wrong. My wife reminds me every day. Remember North Korea? I mean, wasn't it emotional to see on TV today that North Korean soldier defecting to the South? That was very exciting, very emotional. Now, the United States has 3 aircraft carrier battle groups surrounding the Korean Peninsula. But I think Trump has a surprise. If the United States attacks North Korea can do some really big damage to South Korea. They can open up a dam and flood the city of Seoul in South Korea. And they can launch missiles, they can do all kinds of stuff. I think that Trump has a deal with the Russians and the Chinese. Forgive me, I mean, again, I could be wrong. But if the Russians and the Chinese march on North Korea, no missiles will be fired, and the North Korean communist regime falls like a house of cards. And I think Trump said to the Chinese, we're not going to take North Korea away from the communist world. You can keep North Korea. Just get rid of Kim Jong-un. It belongs to you. I mean, Trump will say to the Chinese, North Korea belongs to you. Have fun. Just straighten it out. We can't have a nuclear disaster because of Kim Jong-un. The reason I'm saying this is because Russia is suffering very, very much from sanctions. Sanctions because of Syria, sanctions because of the Ukraine. And I think Trump is going to release Russia from the sanctions if Russia cooperates together with China. And like I said, if Russia and China remove Kim Jong-un and take direct control over North Korea, we will not see a nuclear war. No missiles will be fired. I think no missiles will be fired. That's the deal, as I understand it. Again, I could be totally wrong. It could be that the aircraft carriers are going to do what they're going to have to do. There are also weaponries that I don't want to talk about because I really don't even know the weaponries. They're called scalar. Has anyone heard of scalar weaponries? Scalar weaponries can finish a war with Russia and China in 24 hours. And millions of innocent people die. So we don't want to see that either. And so I think Trump is going to do everything he can to cut a deal. Now, why am I telling you this? Okay, first let's go back a moment. 2004, there was a tremendous explosion in North Korea at a train depot. And the entire city was incinerated by the explosion. Does anyone remember this? 5,000 people in that little city were killed. Israeli military intelligence reads the Arabic newspapers every day. And the Syrian newspapers had obituaries mourning the deaths of their senior generals and officers who died on that train. The train was carrying missile parts and missile fuel for export from North Korea to Syria. So North Korea is directly involved with the weaponries of Syria and Iran. North Korea is a direct threat to Israel and to the United States and to Japan and to South Korea and to Taiwan and to Guam. This is a mess that has to be straightened out immediately. The question is, how do you straighten out the mess with North Korea without getting involved in a missile war, nuclear war, and the killing of millions of people? I think the only way, in my opinion, is the Chinese and the Russians move in. They're not going to aim their missiles at Russia and China. And some generals in North Korea, I think, are smart enough to understand that this leader of theirs is going to have to go. So let's go back to Syria and let's go back to Lebanon. When Bashar al-Assad started his civil war against the Sunnis, and you have to remember that the Sunnis were 18 million, not 18 million, excuse me, big mistake, 15 million. 2 million were Shiites, 2 million were Christian, and 1 million was Druze. But the Sunnis were 15 million. Of the 15 million, 5 million were part of his regime. Almost the entire population that was Sunni was either killed, 500,000, or expelled. All these refugees that flooded Europe were from these Sunnis who fled Syria. And the Turks, under Erdogan, were going to invade Syria. Does anyone remember the Turks were going to invade Syria? And the Iranians, listen carefully, the Iranians said to the Turks, Iranians are Shiites, the Turks are Sunnis. If you invade Syria, we're going to make trouble for you. What kind of trouble? 31% of Turkey is Shiite, and they're persecuted by the Sunnis. 25% of Turkey is Kurdish, and they're persecuted by the Turks. Only 44% of Turkey is Turkish. So, when I asked you at the very beginning, who does not believe in God, I believe God is going to deal with Turkey. Turkey is going to come apart. It's going to be fragmented, just like Syria, just like Iraq. Iran is going to be fragmented because half of Iran is Persian and the rest are minorities, including Kurds and Azeris and Baluchis and Arabs. I mean, these names may be a little strange for you. I live in the middle of all this. The insanity of what's going on in the Middle East is so tremendous. And all these different ethnic groups so hate each other. And I believe that all these countries are going to get fragmented and disintegrated. Not by the Jews, not by Israel, by God. So I believe Russia stands to gain very much from President Trump. This is the price for Russian help with the North Korea issue. And I think Trump has said to Putin that America really is not very interested in Syria, that the Russians handle it. And the Russians have until now. Here comes the problem. And again, I'm going out on a limb and saying things that nobody else is saying. Russia is very wealthy in minerals, gas, and oil. But Russia really does not have, other than military industry, they don't have really anything to export. The people who run the mines and the gasoline and the oil and the diamonds and the minerals, these guys are called oligarchs. There's a small group of people who run the economy. What it really is, it's like mafia groups. Everyone has their turf. And they are suffocating because of the European sanctions. And I think that Putin kind of understands that, and Putin is looking for some kind of a way to ingratiate himself with the US and with Europeans to remove the sanctions. But like other leaders, Putin is facing an increasing amount of opposition from the oligarchs. And again, nobody else in the world is saying what I'm saying now. I believe that there will be an oligarch who will have Putin assassinated. And Putin, once he's gone, the oligarch who will become the next leader of Russia is going to join the European Union. Now, my DVD on the table about the Trump revolution talks about the fact that Trump is not a globalist. Trump is a nationalist. And Trump is a Christian. And Putin is not a globalist. Putin is a nationalist and a Christian. Russian Orthodox, not like American. Netanyahu is not a globalist. Netanyahu is a nationalist Jew and a nationalist and a Jew. Even England is breaking away from the European Union. It's called Brexit. And the British have awakened to the fact that their country is going to become Muslim if they don't stop the immigration. Only way to stop the immigration of Muslims is to leave the European Union. So England, in its own way, is having a Christian revival. And I was in England last November. I'm there almost every other year. The English are waking up, praise God. The globalists are not happy. The globalists want to remove Trump. The globalists want to remove Putin. The globalists want to remove Netanyahu. And the globalists want the British to remain in the European Union. And brothers and sisters, I am very afraid that they in the end, they will win. And at the end of my message, you'll understand where I'm going with this. So the Trump revolution talks about the pendulum swinging to the right. Christianity, revival, nationalism, revival. Now, what I see happening, and I know I don't have 5 hours tonight, I have like 1 hour, so I'm going to try and keep this to the minimum, but to give you the idea of where I'm going with this. Everyone is raving about how ISIS has been defeated. ISIS is Sunni Islam. ISIS is not an aberration. ISIS is Sunni Islam. And Sunni Islam is 85% of the Middle East. You've all heard about the purges in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has arrested a lot of people, and something is going on in Saudi Arabia. I say the Arab Spring of 2011 has come to Saudi Arabia finally. 92% of the Saudi people are in favor of ISIS. 92%. 82% of the Jordanians are pro-ISIS. The Jordanians don't like their king, and the Saudis don't like their king. And so I think we're going to see some very radical things happening. Now, many of you have heard me from messages I did many, many years ago, especially the Dallas Council on World Affairs, that the only thing that made America great is the barrel of oil. And of course, my Christian friends that night said what made America great was not the barrel of oil, but Jesus Christ. How many people remember that testimony? Because I know many of you have heard me here so many times, you've heard this before. The one world government, the globalists, which include Democrats and Republicans. Republicans, by the way, are called rhinos. The ones who support the one world government. Their God is Mammon. You either serve the Lord or you serve Mammon. You cannot serve both. So there are a lot of people who are Democrats or Republicans, and they serve Mammon. So they said they won't let the Jews get in the way. But I have news for you. They won't let ISIS get in the way. Now, ISIS has been saying, if you follow what they're saying, they are going to blow up the oil wells in Saudi Arabia so that Europe, China, India, and Japan will not have oil. How do you destroy the Christianity? You destroy the economy of Christianity. How do you destroy the economy? You destroy the oil. And I don't think the globalist one world government is going to be very, very happy about the oil wells getting blown up. And I believe that the globalist one world government is actually going to invade eastern Saudi Arabia and lay siege to the oil wells and secure them from ISIS attack. This is going to be a major international military effort. When will this happen? I don't know when it's going to happen, but it could happen within a few years, a couple of years. Now, ISIS has also said another thing. The Black Stone in Mecca, the holiest place for all Muslims, is a profane, defiled place going back to Moses. If you remember the story about Phineas, when he skewers the Israelite prince and the Midianite princess who go whoring after her god, the Midianite gods, and Phineas skewers them, kills them, and the plague stops. But then a war starts, and the Israelites have to flee north to the land that God promised. All of this happened at the Black Stone, I believe. This is my theory. I can't imagine any other place other than that. The Black Stone is a horrible pagan place where people sacrifice their children on the altar of Molech. And forgive me for the political incorrectness, acts of homosexuality, acts of bestiality, in other words, sleeping with animals. Lots of crazy stuff happened at this Black Stone. And so ISIS very correctly says Muhammad should never have incorporated the Black Stone into Islam. Therefore, ISIS has a plan to blow up the Black Stone. But the Black Stone is the holiest place of Islam. So if ISIS blows up the Black Stone, guess what? They've beheaded the snake. They've beheaded this so-called religion, Islam. So when ISIS blows up the oil wells, and ISIS blows up the Black Stone, and ISIS kills the king of Saudi Arabia, and you have complete pandemonium in Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia will have to be occupied by foreign forces. And again, I'm the only one who's saying this stuff. You can totally deny what I'm saying or say Avi's crazy. It's okay. But I'm here to tell you what I feel in my bones is going to happen. And so I think that the one world government is going to say to Israel, now you build your temple. Because ISIS has been banned. Islam has been banned. They're trying to blow up the oil wells. They're going to destroy the wealth of the human race, kill billions of people. And so the one world government will say to Israel, now you build your temple, because there's no one to object to it. And we of the one world government, we will help you to build your temple in Jerusalem. Because you were right. You Jews were right all along. And you know what? After we help you build your temple, we're going to send our top leader of the one world government to officiate at your temple. Who's this top leader of the one world government? The Antichrist. Can you believe a Jew teaching this? And when is all this going to happen? Mañana. Mañana is good enough for me. I mean, this could happen literally tomorrow. Because ISIS is so crazy. And ISIS has not been defeated. And I want to tell you something else also. You've all heard me say this many times in this church. The Muslims are pouring into this country because it's so much better here than from wherever they came from. But they bite the hand that feeds them. They don't understand that the greatest country on earth, America, the greatest country with the greatest blessings because of God, Bible, Israel, and Jesus Christ. And the Muslims hate all that. And they have a bottom line. Their bottom line that no Muslim can deny. Kill the Jew on Saturday, kill the Christian on Sunday. And I explained in the past that there were, in 1970, 100,000 Muslims in America. Jews were number 2. This was a Judeo-Christian country. Christians were number 1, and Jews were 6 million. We were number 2. How many people have heard me explain the numbers, that it's about 30 million Muslims in America today? In the last 50 years. How did they come in? They came in by plan. And they're 30 million. And I have news for you. Until this major outbreak takes place with the Muslims in America, they're going to keep pouring into this country. Remember Erdogan? I spoke about Erdogan from Turkey. Erdogan has a plan. He's got millions of Syrian refugees in his country. And he's got Turks he wants to get rid of. And he says to the Europeans and he says to the Americans, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to send all these refugees to you. So you're going to get millions and millions more Muslims in this country. Because America is the greatest economic power in the world, and America is the country with the greatest ability to absorb these people, even if they're poison for your country. I've been here so many times, I know that I've shared everything here. And you all know Exodus 28 to Exodus 29 talks about Egypt being destroyed. Does anyone remember that teaching? For 40 years, no human or animal will tread in Egypt. What's Egypt? It's the Nile Valley. From Aswan all the way to the Mediterranean. What's in Aswan? The dam. Now, why would that dam go? It could be an earthquake. They could destroy it. But Egypt is Sunni. Saudi is Sunni. The Iranians are Shiites and they want to destroy the Saudi Sunni kingdom. So Egypt said to Iran, if you attack Saudi, we come in to defend Saudi. So the Iranians said to the Egyptians, we blow up the Aswan Dam. Are you with me? I mean, I listen to what the banter that goes on between these leaders. If you blow up the Aswan Dam, you unleash a tsunami from Lake Nasser, and Egypt gets flushed down the toilet, literally. And so then you're going to have tens of millions of Egyptians fleeing to high ground, and either you fly in water and food every day for 50, 60, 70 million people, or you pick them up and you bring them here. You're going to have 100 million Muslims in this country. Even under Trump. I'm not criticizing Trump. There are things that Trump is not in control. God is in control. I have a dear friend. How many people, have you ever had Bill Salas here? Bill Salas is with me in these prophecy conferences. He specializes on Iran. I think he quotes Isaiah 33. It talks about Elam, E-L-A-M. Elam is Persia, is Iran. And it says in Isaiah, Elam will be completely destroyed, and the people will be scattered. Guess what? They're Iranians. So you're going to have 10, 20 million Muslims more coming from Iran. These countries are all being destroyed by God. And I'll tell you the truth, the only solution will be to ban Islam and convert these people to Christianity. Either you bring them to the Lord or they'll bring them to the sword. They don't understand that you only have the blessings in this country that you have because of your faith. And anyone who comes to this country and doesn't accept the faith can leave. And if they want to destroy your country, you're going to build jails. You know, I have to tell you something really crazy. You know, I do crazy stuff. I say crazy things. I was invited a year ago to speak in a place called Faroe Islands. Has anyone heard of Faroe Islands? Faroe Islands are little fishing islands between Norway and Iceland in the North Atlantic. And I went there. And I want you to know, I had a wonderful time. I love these people, fishermen, Viking people. They're very austere. They received me very warmly. And on the last day, I was in the biggest church in Faroe Islands. The biggest church in Faroe Islands has 500 people. The whole population is 25,000. I mean, I reached 1,000 people in my meetings. So I covered about 4% of the population. That's pretty good. And they asked me, they said, you know, that Iceland is taking in 22,000 Muslim refugees. And they have a kinship with Iceland. So they said, if Iceland takes 22,000, we should take 2,000 or 3,000. What do you think, Avi? And I said, it's a wonderful idea. Why do you say it's a wonderful idea? But they're Muslims. I said, yeah. You're going to have such a prosperity in this country. I mean, they're waiting for the incoming. I said, you know, I've been here a week in Faroe Islands, and I haven't seen one policeman. There's no army. They're fishermen. There's one policeman. There's no jail. There's no jail in Faroe Islands. All they have is a detention room for one night for drunk drivers. Some of them get drunk. Everyone gets drunk sometime. They have one room for one driver per night. No jail, no police, no army. I said, you're going to have such a prosperity because you're going to have to build jails. You're going to have a big police force. You're going to have an army. 25,000 people, fishermen. You're going to have lawyers, wardens, because you're going to be full of Muslims in your jails. And they're going to rape every woman on this island. And if they don't rape the women, they'll rape the little boys. So go ahead, bring them. So they decided not to bring any Muslims into their little islands. Because these fishermen, they have a Garden of Eden. They don't need a police because these people are Christians. They're law-abiding. They're hard-working, industrious people. Now they want me to go to Iceland and talk. I may go to Iceland, Norway, Denmark. I don't know what to do because now I have an invitation to go with a missionary to China, January 20th, January 30th. I have to sit down for 10 days and teach 31 pastors in China because they don't have a clue about Islam. And I probably will have meetings with senior communist officials in China because they don't have a clue what Islam is. And they don't understand that this is a war between God and Satan. And if you don't defeat Satan, he takes over. And that's what China is. China has a problem. They have 70 million Muslims. And these Muslims are free to travel anywhere in People's Republic of China. They can do crazy stuff. They're already doing crazy things. And I want you to know, there is no Muslim who will deny that on the day of judgment, every Jew will be killed and some Jews will hide behind rocks and trees. And on that day, Allah will give mouths to the rocks and trees and they will call out, "O Muslim pursuers, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him." How many people have heard me say that here? I must have said it dozens of times here. And Jesus Christ is coming back a second time as an Arabic-speaking Muslim warrior. How many people know that? Ask any Muslim. You know what they're going to say to you? "You're so smart. How did you hear about this? Who did you hear this from?" Say, "Avi Lipkin was here, but he already went to Amarillo. And next week he's in Oklahoma City. Next week he's in Dallas. And after that he's on his way back to Florida and back to the U.S." Because for Muslims, every Jew dies, and every true Christian who will not convert to Islam dies. And Jesus Christ slits the throats of all of us. This is what they believe. Their Jesus Christ is going to slit our throats. And these are the people your governments have been bringing in over the last 50 years for economic convenience. And because of that, I know that Jewish blood will be flowing in the streets of America. And you know, synagogues don't want to hear a word I'm saying. The Jews don't want to hear me. The only people who listen to me are the Christians. God bless all the Christians. God bless the Jews too. I'm sorry they have veils over their eyes. Where did we hear that from? Do you understand why I'm forming a Judeo-Christian party in Israel? Because we're going to need it. Because our population will grow from 6 million Jews, 500,000 Christians, to about 13 million Jews and 5 million Christians. And our borders are going to grow. Because Israel will be called by the Lebanese people to come and defend them from the Sunnis. And to go into Syria to defend the Druze and the Christians and the Yazidis and the Kurds, because the Sunnis are going to kill all of them too. And Jordan and Saudi are going to fall to ISIS. So Israel's borders are going to grow. Israel's population is going to grow. I know some of you may go home alarmed, but the good news is, do you think Christian America is going to lose? Christian America is going to win. But it's going to be difficult, because either you convert these people or they're going to kill you. You really cannot send them back, because where they came from is a hellhole. It's all wherever Islam goes, wherever Satan goes, he destroys everything. What is Satan? Satan is the great destroyer. Satan is the great liar. All this is what they're preaching is lies and destruction. And I want you to know, don't think for a moment that I hate the Muslims. I love them. I'm crying in my soul for the Muslims because they're suffering as a result of this crazy, wacky system called Islam, which I call a criminal psychosis. How many people remember I have a 3-year jail sentence in Switzerland? You talk the truth, you get a jail sentence. So anyway, all I can say in conclusion is strengthen yourselves, strengthen your pastors, strengthen your churches, strengthen your civic organizations. Share this message with everyone you know, because there are a lot of good people who are atheists or apostate. They're going to be killed too. And there are a lot of people who are how shall I say, they're logical people, even if they're not believers. And when you explain to them, this is what's about to happen in this country, at first they may say you're crazy, but as the things unfold, they're going to say, you know, you were right. One last thing I wanted to share tonight. And I think I mentioned, when I was here last time, did I talk about American postage stamps from 1962 and about, the Battle of Shiloh? And I mean, in 1962, if you said Shiloh, the only place you were thinking of was Tennessee, Civil War battle in 1962. But in 1967, Israel won the Six-Day War, and all of a sudden, we found all these Bible heartland places. And the archaeologists came in, and they found the real Shiloh. And they dug 6 feet down in front of one of the Greek churches, and it said, "May the Lord Jesus have mercy on the people of Shiloh." Bingo, we understood that was Shiloh, that it really was Shiloh. So my son has a DVD about that. And if you prove that Shiloh existed, then the prophet Samuel existed. If the prophet Samuel existed, King David and King Saul existed, because there are idiots who call themselves professors who say that David and Solomon and Saul never existed, and that Moses and Joshua never existed. If you get my son's DVD about Bethel, you see that Joshua and the footprints, Joshua and Moses really existed. And don't feel bad as Christians, because we had a Jewish prime minister, Yitzhak Rabin, who was assassinated. He said the Bible is a bunch of fairy tales, because he was a socialist communist. Socialist communists don't believe in the Bible, neither do Democrats. You know, Democrats are today the most anti-Semitic party ever in American history. I hope I didn't offend. My family always voted Democrat in the 60s and that era. And so we have two enemies. Every Jew and Christian has two enemies. The Muslims, or not the Muslims, Islam. Muslims are good people. Islam is like a Nazi system. Germans are okay people. Nazis are not. Islam and atheism. And so when you watch the 3 DVDs that my son made, my son is a cream pie. I'm in your face, kind of. My son is a sweetie. Everybody loves my son. But his teachings should be in every church in the world, because they prove the veracity of the Bible, of God's word. It means God is really there. I tried to show you today that God's in charge in the Middle East, and God's in charge in America. Everything that's going on in the news today, God's in charge. Sometimes you don't understand it at first, but then it becomes clear. So, brothers and sisters, my message always is a message of strengthening your faith, strengthening this church, which I love very much, Pastor Gary and his family, whom I love very, very much, and all of you, whom I love very, very much. And I want to say I hope to see you back in March, April, but a lot depends on the party being recognized. Because if the party gets recognized, or when it gets recognized, I'm a politician. I'm the Jewish Huckabee. And I've got to stay home and start campaigning with my Judeo-Christian political party, and help to prepare the way for the 10 million Jews and Christians coming home, and help to prepare the way for the Messiah to stand on the Mount of Olives. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
We don't usually finish until 8, so
Oh, we do questions and answers.
yeah. So, but who has a question for Albert?
Yes. Microphone.
I don't have one with a battery, I don't think. Guys,
Okay.
let me get one real
Are we taping or?
taping and streaming, so I want to get a mic. We can get him one real quick. In the meantime, let me say this. We have a basket here and a basket there. Anything that goes in those baskets will be for Avi. Make it out to CCE. We'll give him one check before he leaves, and help support him as he continues to do a very valuable work that probably nobody else on the planet is doing. So,
If I may add something also, I'm also taking checks, if people are so led of the Lord,
for the party,
for the party. So write down in small letters, advocate. Advocate means lawyer. I'll fill in the name of the lawyer, Yair Feiglin. And I go back to Israel in 3 weeks. I'll take him the checks, and that will go towards the registration process.
and do please keep that whole Bible block party in prayer. Pray that it'll pass through the second stage, the Department of Justice, right?
Department of Justice, Registrar of Political Parties.
So, okay, here we go.
Thanks for that talk. I'm kind of new to this fellowship, and some of the things you're saying are a little bit of a different take than what I've heard from other speakers. If I can mention a couple names, because I'd like your perspective and kind of try to, if you could try to blend maybe, if you're familiar with the names, what they're putting out. Amir Sarfati is.
Amir Sarfati, I've seen his teachings, and he's pretty good.
He seems to be up on things that are happening and have a good biblical perspective.
Right, I like him.
He also talks with J.D. Farag quite a bit, who talks a lot about Ezekiel 38. Jan Markell has a weekly radio.
I've been on her
Have you?
TV and also radio shows.
Okay, so
When,
then
in
you
the summer,
have a flavor
yeah.
of where we're getting our information.
right,
It's a bit different from what you're talking about.
right,
One of the things I'll narrow in specifically is, one of the things that's been said is, well, okay, North Korea is just a distraction so that Russia and Iran can do their thing in the Middle East undetected, busy the U.S., keep us out of Syria, trying to reinsert ourselves again while they do what they want to do because they're really after oil. Maybe that's simplistic, but that's kind of in a general way what my perception was. Can you please comment about all of that?
yes, indeed. What I said before, I will reemphasize. Korea, North Korea, is part of an axis of Iran and Syria, and also Russia and China. And I think what President Trump is trying to do is to wean Russia and China away from North Korea, which is a rogue country. Russia now has become the number one supplier for Iran. And frankly, I'm very, very torn myself between liking Russia for defending the Christians in Syria and Lebanon, and not liking Russia for helping arm Iran, which is today Israel's greatest enemy, and sworn to destruction of Israel. And Iran is not a country that looks to supply the West with oil. That's the job of the Saudis. The Iranians supply oil to China, which is an ally. It's interesting that the United States also supplies China and Japan with oil from Alaska. I don't know if you knew that. There's a regular line of tankers, and America is trying to, how shall I say, to wean China away from the enemies of America by also helping China to have oil. I mean, these are all calculations that people in the back rooms do in Washington, and I don't know. I'm fairly confident that Korea is not a distraction. Korea is really a problem. And like I said before, Korea was sending all these weapons to Iran and Syria. If you remember, there was a nuclear reactor built in Syria, Deir Azur, built by the North Koreans on North Korean technology. The reactors in Iran are North Korean. I'll add another thing. Pakistan, which is Sunni, it has provided nuclear warheads for Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has nuclear warheads and Chinese missiles. I don't know if you heard the name Abdul Qadir Khan. He's the father of the Pakistani nuclear project. Saudis paid for it. In my red book on the table, there's a whole article there from Israeli intelligence about 120 Dongfeng missiles, which are like Pershings, which are sold by China to Saudi. So there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on with weaponries. But Korea, which is an ally of China and Russia, is an ally and a supplier of Iran and Syria. So you know the game pickup sticks? North Korea is the easiest of the pickup sticks, if Trump can get China and Russia to do it. If China and Russia will not act, I believe Trump is going to act. Trump will send the U.S. Navy. America has B-1s and B-2s and missiles and scalar weapons, which could bring North Korea to its knees in 24 hours. But I believe Trump wants to cut a deal with the Russians and the Chinese that they should do it. And they will enjoy some kind of benefit from that. I think the next pickup stick is Iran. So then you have to see, what does Russia gain from its relationship with Iran, and simply offer them something better. And again, if Putin is taken out by an oligarch who is pro-European Union, who knows? I mean, there's stuff that none of us in this room really know. We are here to discuss what does God say, what does the Bible say, how does that apply to the reality, okay? But I love Jan Markell. I've been with her often. I love Amir Tsarfati. There's a lot of good people. You know, I mean, I worked with Chuck Missler for many, many years. Chuck Missler is another example, and a lot of the people that he brought over all these years. And they talk about the same analysis, same evaluations. Yeah, another question?
This army of the New World Order that you mentioned, will they be flying the flag of the UN?
Could be. Could be. Let me say one thing about the UN, and let me say something about one of the 8 principles of my party. If you get my book about Israel's Bible block, one of the principles of my party is to create a Judeo-Christian United Nations in Jerusalem. And I'll explain what I mean. In 1945, when the United Nations was created, I think it was 40 countries. Most of the countries, there were communist nations, but a lot of the countries were Anglo and Western European. And today, the United Nations is all the nations in the world, 200 nations. 2/3 of the population or more are not Christian. 2/3 of the nations are Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, and communist. In other words, the United Nations faithfully represents non-Christian ideologies, meaning United Nations cannot be pro-Christian. Now, if your God is Mammon, which is the globalists, that's not Christian. That's one world government. So UN, one world government, globalism, Mammon, communism, I say it ironically, Chinese communism is a capitalism today. They're the most capitalist country in the world. One of my hopes in my trip to China will be to strengthen the Christians in their Christianity and to try to open the eyes of the communist officials that Christianity would be very, very good for Chinese economy. And I've heard Chinese communist people saying, communist officials saying that as long as they don't adopt the 10 Commandments, China can never become world power number 1. Thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. I mean, these are things that are preventing China from assuming a greater role in human history. So I'm forming a Judeo-Christian UN in Jerusalem, which will invite political parties which are democratic in nature, not democratic in nature, and conservative countries that have a democratic system based on Judeo-Christianity. So this whole idea of establishing a one world government is not necessarily, probably not a Christian idea at all. It's a globalist idea. And I'm trying to put together an opposing Christian, Judeo-Christian, well, Israel's Jewish, so we're the only Jewish country in the world. And together with the Christians, put together a Judeo-Christian United Nations in Jerusalem. That's kind of a crazy thought, but it's one of my ideas.
You mentioned some kind of weaponry.
Scalar weaponry.
Yes. Can you explain that a little bit?
Um,
Who has it?
First, let me say one thing. I am very ignorant about these weaponries. I really don't know what they are. But I will say one thing. You heard of Star Wars. Star Wars, one of the things that they developed is something called the Nautilus. Now, Israel has the Nautilus. Got it from the United States. Nautilus is a laser that you can fire this. I don't know if you remember, Obama was mocking a certain weaponry. It was a 747 aircraft with a Nautilus on board, and this thing could launch a laser beam from 20, 30 miles away at an incoming missile and incinerate it in the air. This gentleman is saying it was developed here at Kirkland. So Nautilus is one of the Star Wars weapons Now, I heard something, and again, I can't corroborate. I don't know if it's true. But do you remember Noriega in Panama? Well, when the U.S. went in to get him, there were demonstrations. There was all kind of stuff going on in Panama. And people were basically severed in half by laser beam. I don't know if it's true. I heard it. So let me just say it like this. There are weaponries that the United States has, maybe the Russians also have, maybe the Chinese have, that will make modern armies, tanks, artillery, infantry, aircraft, make it all look like fighting with sticks and stones. The future of warfare is going to be scalar. And unless the Russians have some knockout punch, which we don't know about, the U.S. can take out Russia and China in 24 hours, and North Korea too. So, you know, like, it's what I heard. I have no idea because I'm not in that kind of technology, but I hear it all the time from other people who are.
Somebody else have a question? Let's try somebody else first. If we have anybody else? Okay, back to you.
Thanks. Just wanted to follow up on something else I'm trying to put together. In 2006, Joel Rosenberg released his book Epicenter. He really focused on Ezekiel 38, War of Gog Magog, which, to my understanding, and I guess to his, I don't want to speak for him, but is a invasion of Israel, Russia at the head, supplier of weapons, along with a variety of other countries, named specifically, but by their ancient names. One I'm trying to understand a little bit better is, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, House of Togarmah, and if I hope I'm not misrepresenting what he said in his book, but this is Turkey, roughly. Now, in 2006, Turkey had very good relations with Israel. from what I
Not very
understand.
good. Relations between Turkey and Israel have always been so-so.
But
And then they got-
mutually beneficial economically, correct? Is that
Yeah, but it was 50-50, you could say.
So the way he put it in his book, to the best of my recollection, is he's saying, well, right now, Turkey has good relations with Israel. But if Ezekiel 38 plays out the way, you know, we seem to understand it, something's going to change, something's going to turn, and Turkey's not going to be buddies with Israel so much anymore. Well, that happened.
With Mavi
the
Marmara.
flotilla.
With the
and
flotilla.
The whole bit.
Right.
So can you comment on how you perceive this? Is Turkey House of Togarmah? How do you understand that conglomerate of nations described in Ezekiel 38?
Excellent question. Firstly, let me start by saying that the Chuck Missler school of thought was saying that Russia was the Gog and Magog. And I always disagreed with that because I always said that Russia basically is a Christian country and no Christian country would attack Israel. You have to remember also that Russia did not exist when Ezekiel wrote. Russia was just empty steppes, empty prairie. I believe that the Armageddon will be the Sunni Turks. In other words, not only Turkey, it'll be the Sunni Turks from the 6 republics that broke away from the Soviet Union, which Russia was so happy to get rid of. You have to remember, the Soviet Union was 200 million Muslims out of a total population of 350 million. Today, Russia has 150 million people, most of which are Russian Orthodox. Now, one of the problems Christian Russia is facing today is that the Muslims, who today are in the minority in what remains of Russia, but they have 12 kids per family. And so the conscripts in the Russian army today are approaching 50% Muslim, meaning the writing is on the wall for Russia. If the Russian Christian faith doesn't do something, they will become again a Muslim majority country. But at this time, I would say it's the 200 million Turkic Muslims of the 6 republics that broke away from Soviet Union. In other words, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, etc. And again, Turkey also could be part of this because the Turks are the biggest minority in Turkey, 44%. 31% are Shiite, who all have to be killed. 25% Kurds who want to break away, therefore they have to be killed. And Iran itself is facing a big potential rebellion from the Baluchis in the southeast, who are part of Pakistan. The Azeris were part of Azerbaijan, Sunnis also. The Kurds, Sunnis also. And so there's this complete pandemonium in all these countries, except for the 200 million broke away from Russia. That could be the Armageddon. Don't forget also, you have a very, very radicalizing movement today in Indonesia of 200 million Sunnis. And I wouldn't be surprised if Indonesia, the 200 million, and the 200 million of the Turkic republics of the former Soviet Union, that's 400 million, that could become a formidable army of Gog and Magog. I don't think it's the Russians. I don't think it's anyone Christian.
Time for probably one more at least. Anybody? We don't get Avi that often, so you should take advantage of this.
It might be that the next time you get me is when you're in Jerusalem in the Knesset.
One more. Come on, somebody must have. Huh? Okay.
Those people that you spoke of that follow Jethro or believe in Jethro, what exactly do they believe in?
Okay, excellent question. And I cannot really answer you because the Druze religion is secret. And I have a few guesses as to why it's secret. Now, again, you've got to know Genesis. Abraham has many children. He has Ishmael from Hagar. That's the forefather of the Muslims. He has Isaac. Isaac is the forefather of the Judeo-Christians. And then he has Midian. Midian is a son of Keturah, the woman he marries after. Huh? Oh, he has a lot, but Midian is the one you hear about. And Jethro is descended from Midian. Now, you remember the story about the almost sacrifice of Isaac. So the Muslims, okay, and the Druze say that it was Ishmael. Don't forget, Midian and all the children of Keturah were expelled by Abraham to the east. And they mingled with the Ishmaelites. You remember Joseph is in the pit? It's unbelievable. What's happening today in the Middle East, you really want to understand it, you've got to study Genesis and Exodus. So Joseph is lifted out of the pit by a caravan of Ishmaelites and Midianites. They're all half-brothers of Isaac and the descendants. And they take Joseph out of the pit. Joseph says who he is. He's the son of Jacob, who's their long-lost, hated cousin. Do you think the Ishmaelites and the Midianites send Joseph back to his father in peace? No, they take him to Egypt and sell him for 30 pieces of silver, 40 pieces, whatever. And so the tradition today, there's a holiday called Eid al-Adha. Eid al-Adha is the commemoration of the almost sacrifice of Ishmael in Mecca at the Black Stone. So the Druze differ from the Judeo-Christians in that Jews and Christians agree that it is Isaac that is the chosen son. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It says in the New Testament 7 times. So the Jews tend to side more with the Muslims, but the Muslims want to kill the Jews because they don't say that Muhammad is the greatest and latest. They say Jethro is. And by the way, our Judeo-Christian Bible praises Jethro. It never says one bad thing about Jethro. He was a special man. So I respect the Druze. I love them. I'm ready to go to war for them. But their religion is not Judeo-Christian in essence. It's more Islamic in essence. And their emphasis is on Jethro and not on Muhammad. I mean, we're talking between you and me, what's 3,000, 4,000 years? Good question.
It's 4 minutes till. Anybody all of a sudden come up with another one? All right, let's stand. You can also talk to Avi when he's over there at his table, so if you have something else that comes to mind. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this time together tonight. Thank you that you brought Avi to visit once again. Thank you for all that were able to come, and also for those that perhaps watched on the live stream. And we just pray that once again you'd help us to take the information that Avi's given us and process it and utilize it in the way that you would have us to use it, Lord. We thank you for the opportunity to be aware, to be informed, to not be in the dark, and to be able to know how to pray more effectively for our nation, for Israel, and for the state of the entire world. The sense of urgency to win as many as possible to Christ before it's too late. We thank you that your hand of protection is on your people, as Avi talked about tonight, that you have blessed us tremendously, and we have nothing to fear, that your perfect love casts out all fear. You've not given us a spirit of fear. And Lord, no matter what happens, we know that you will be with us. You promised to never leave us nor forsake us. So we thank you for this time together tonight. We pray for safe travel as we return home, and that you'd be with Avi and keep him safe on the road as well, and provide for all of his needs as he continues to dedicate his life to the calling that you've placed upon him. It's not an easy lifestyle, traveling all over across the country and around the world, and it takes a toll physically, emotionally, spiritually, in every level, and yet he has remained faithful. We ask you to strengthen him and bless him. Bless the offering. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.